From the headquarters of Talisio English, this is From the South, and I am Soini Gray. Legendary soul singer Aretha Franklin has died. Tributes are pouring in from across the globe for the groundbreaking artist, also known as the Queen of Soul. Famous for her hit Respect, she dominated music charts for 7 decades. She'd been suffering from cancer and retired from music last year. She was 76. You are going to be looking at live pictures outside the Apollo Theater in Harlem, New York, where they've changed the marquee to pay respect to Franklin. The Apollo is a famed theater in Harlem, and it usually pays respects to artists who have performed in the legendary theater. As we said, tributes are pouring in for the legendary singer Lionel Richie, reminisced by sharing an old photograph of him and Franklin and said that he'll miss her. And even more contemporary artists paid their tributes. Missy Elliott praised Franklin for being an inspiration, saying, "Rest. I imagine you in heaven performing and still making people's souls move. Thank you for giving us legendary, timeless music." Sir Rod Stewart shared a video of the duo performing. He tweeted, "Not only the Queen of Soul, but the Queen of all our hearts." Other news now. In Brazil, the general prosecutor, Raquel Duhe, is trying to have Lula da Silva's candidacy revoked. The prosecutor had warned since July that she would not allow it. She made a formal complaint to the Superior Electoral Court. Quoting from the Clean Sheet Act, Duhe said Lula's sentence has only just begun and hasn't been exhausted. A candidate is only eligible to serve 8 years after serving a sentence. Gilisi Hoffman has accused Duhe of being part of the coup. On Wednesday, she was excited to register Lula for the presidential race.
Arriving here and having this document in our hands is an immense victory. It's not our victory. It's not a victory for the Workers' Party, for Lula. It's a victory for the Brazilian people. It's a victory for those who have believed in social justice, for those who have believed in a better Brazil.
And Mia Alberti has more.
Well, this was something that we were expecting. Late last night, the public prosecutor filed a complaint against Lula da Silva candidacy as a presidential candidate. And this means that the Electoral Court will now review Lula's case and will most likely ban him from being a candidate. And this is because, according to a law called the Ficha Limpa law, if someone has been convicted on a second instance, they cannot run for the presidency. And this is the law that the public prosecutor's office is quoting and that the Electoral Court will take into account. And this has been something that we have been expecting. And now we expect, after Lula is banned from being a candidate, we expect his lawyers to appeal on that decision, while they also appeal his conviction on the first place to try and get him acquitted in time for the elections. That would allow Lula to be a candidate freely like any other person. Now, just a few important informations. None of the candidates right now is actually an official candidate. What they did yesterday was to file a request to be a candidate. After that, there will be 5 days that the public prosecutor or the other parties can complain about that request, and the Electoral Court will either approve it or deny it. And in the case of Lula, it's likely that the Electoral Court will deny it. A river of support for Lula. Thousands of followers of the former president marched to Brasilia on Wednesday to witness his registration as the official presidential candidate for the Workers' Party. Some of them even walked for days, marching for the candidate, whom they believe will restore stability in Brazil.
We came here to go to the court to register Lula's candidacy, and we're not leaving until that is done. We have the hope and certainty that only Lula will be able to lead the Brazilian people to be victorious in the elections, to take possession of the presidency and to reorganize Brazil, starting in 2019.
Lula da Silva is still serving a 12-year jail sentence in Curitiba, so it was up to his vice presidential pick, Fernando Haddad, to take lead as he confirmed Lula's official registration.
I am certain that this gesture expresses the wishes of millions of Brazilians who want to bring Lula back to the Planalto Palace. He represents the hopes, dreams, and wishes for a better future, and has all the attributes to lead Brazil out of this crisis that was imposed on us.
On the streets and online, the hashtag Lula is candidate was trending on Twitter all day. Lula is by far the most popular candidate, according to the latest polls, but the real fight starts now. The Electoral Court is expected to reject Lula's registration as a presidential candidate. The known as Ficha Limpa law says persons sentenced after an appeal cannot run for presidency. And the newly elected president of the Electoral Court, Rosa Weber, has been a hard defender of that law. Lula's lawyers are expected to continue to appeal on his sentence until the last minute. If they manage to do so until September 17th, Lula's face and name will be on the ballot, but the real candidate will be Fernando Haddad. Only one question remains: will Lula be allowed to run? Well, it's unlikely that the Electoral Court will allow it, so Lula's best chance is to be acquitted of all of his crimes. Time is against him, but if he managed to do that before the elections, what we saw today, all of the support and the polls suggest that he will be again the president of Brazil. Mia Alberti, Telesur, in São Paulo.
In Venezuela, Foreign Minister Jorge Arias has met with different ambassadors to deal with topics related to the investigations of the attempted assassination against President Nicolas Maduro, as well as other matters of foreign policy. Arias made a formal complaint against Japan based on their statements about Venezuela. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Taro Kono, who's in Peru, said Tuesday the countries had agreed to continue calling for Venezuela to restore democracy. Arias called the statements hostile against international law and following Washington's line. The Venezuelan government has asked the Peruvian police to locate 2 Venezuelan citizens they accuse of being part of the August 4th attack on President Maduro. The Peruvian Foreign Ministry said the Venezuelan authorities are looking for 6 officers of the Bolivarian army who had been on the run for over a year. And still in Venezuela, the rainy season continues. 60 tropical waves are expected. The government has declared a red alert in the Orinoco Basin and Caroni rivers, where the growth of the rivers have exceeded historical levels.
The Miranda district is one of the most affected in Puerto Ayacucho, in the state of Amazonas. The swelling of the Orinoco River has buried several houses underwater. Roger Guevara lost some of his belongings. He never imagined that the river would rise this much.
I was probably 12 years old when something like this happened, but the rise of the river this year has been even bigger. The Orinoco River really grew incredibly. I didn't imagine that it could get to my house.
The regional government has moved 6,700 families to the transitory shelters.
They have helped us, they have moved us, they have activated a lot of institutions that were not functioning to put us there. They have brought us food, water, they have placed people in charge of us and have organized us shelter. So far, it's been really good.
Experts believe that this rain and these floods are the result of climate change.
This is an extreme hydrometeorological event. This has not been seen in this century or in the last century.
The government activated an aerial bridge where more than 90 tons of medicine and food have been sent to those affected.
A lot of people live on the riverbanks because they did not have any other opportunity. Today, the river took its course in a way that hasn't happened in 42 years. This has a lot to do with climate change. It has to do with the deforestation of these basins in Colombia that give us a lot of the water today that we are receiving in the Orinoco River.
The government has also approved the shipment of 2 boats from the Bolivarian National Navy that will take 142 tons of food.
More than 1 million cars have registered in the National Transportation Census that will end on Friday.
Plaza Bolivar in the capital Caracas is one of the places across Venezuela where people can register their car for the national census for transportation, aimed at distributing fuel more efficiently.
I think this is a good measure because it allows the people to access subsidies to fuel, just like the president promised with the census. The government will know how many people have registered and will be able to make decisions regarding the transportation sector.
Authorities are hoping to register 2 million cars. The new measurements aren't just for private vehicles.
The census will hopefully also improve public transportation. Despite having a car, people are also always using it. So I am hoping we have more benefits regarding this service as well.
For Venezuelans who support this national census, the fuel subsidies are only accessible to them. Another reason for the subsidy is to end fuel smuggling to Colombia.
Fuel smuggled to Colombia and the Caribbean. This really hurts our economy. I'm hoping this new measure works. But fuel in Venezuela will be sold at international prices to end smuggling. People registered for the census will access the subsidies.
People can register their car with their car number plate and their government ID.
More news in a minute, but first here's a video from our colleagues in multimedia.
We are looking to expand partnerships where it's mutually beneficial, no hesitation at all. We see Latin America as a neighbor. Some people say we don't pay much attention to it. That certainly is not the case in the military.
Welcome back. 51 Colombian immigrants were deported from Chile early Thursday morning. This operation is being seen as an example of President Sebastián Piñera's zero-tolerance policy on illegal immigration. Our correspondent in Santiago, Paola Dragnish, has the details.
Of those deported, 32 had criminal records and 19 were simply undocumented immigrants. Immigrant rights groups have been fighting this decision, arguing non-immigrant can be considered illegal, given that migration is a human right. Nonetheless, President Sebastián Piñera is fulfilling his promise of cleaning house by getting rid of unwanted immigrants. Let's remember that in a decree from April of this year, he gave immigrants 90 days to resolve their legal situation, or else they would be deported. This is the first wave of mass deportation, and it has taken everyone by surprise since it was announced past midnight on Thursday. Leaving the present immigrant rights group scrambling to figure out what's happening, another point of interest is that all of those targeted in this operation were Colombian citizens, so now we have to wait and see if another nationality will be targeted next, with no distinction made to whether they have criminal records or have simply been unable to resolve their legal situation. This act by Piñera's administration is a reminder of what his policies on migration are, and also resemble the rhetoric of Donald Trump in the United States.
Not enough senators showed up for the vote on the police probe against the former Argentine president, Cristina Fernández de Kirchner. A vote would have approved a search of her properties as part of the corruption investigation. But less than 37 senators showed up to the chamber. The former president is dogged by corruption allegations during her term. Now, she's acknowledged that there could have been corruption during her government, but denies personal involvement.
We believe the raid is a type of test that doesn't define the degree of responsibility, but is a task from the judge which cannot be halted as part of the investigation, which is part of pre-trial. We have maintained in the judgment that we support. We have maintained that it should be done with prudence, as we are talking about a national senator who is carrying out her term and who is also a former president.
Staying in Argentina, the Supreme Court has overturned Milagros Sala's prison transfer. The court ruled that the social leader and member of the Mercosur Parliament should be returned to house arrest. She was sent to a federal prison last week where she began a hunger strike. The accusations against Sala include fraud and extortion. She was detained for allegedly instigating violence during a protest she says she didn't attend in early 2016. And our correspondent in Argentina, Sabrina Roth, has more.
Thursday is the last day for the Argentinian government to expunge the Inter-American Court of Human Rights why the provisional measure in favor of Milagros Sala to serve the rest of her sentence under house arrest has not been fulfilled. It was the IACHR itself which gave this decree and demanded the change provisional detention for house arrest in the province of Jujuy. The measure was not fulfilled, even though in December 5, 2017, Argentina's Supreme Court ruled that social leader be returned to house arrest. A few days ago, she was transferred to a federal prison in the northwestern province of Salta on the order of Judge Pablo Puyen y Hermanos. On Friday, Sala supporters also presented new evidence that her life is threatened after she sustained injuries while being transferred from the prison in Salta to the court in Jujuy. Argentina's highest court has given the Provincial Court of Jujuy 5 days to explain the reasons why it didn't adhere to the High Court's ruling.
Jamaica's Prime Minister Andrew Holness has given an all-encompassing press conference on the state of his nation. Among the key announcements, the government repaid $58 billion of debt in June. The reserves at the central bank are in excess of $3 billion, the highest in decades, and serious crime is down in all areas. Prime Minister Holness also announced the government purchased 2 helicopters for the Defense Force, and he also hailed the successes of Jamaicans using Airbnb, the home-sharing website, for profit, which is said to be a major boost for the island's tourism industry.
Now, a development which Jamaicans should pay attention to is the growth of the Airbnb market. I am actually very surprised at the wide scale of Airbnb in Jamaica. In Kingston alone, it is reported that in 2017, Jamaicans earned approximately $24 million US just in Kingston and St. Andrew region.
Former Attorney General of the United States of America, Eric Holder Jr., returned to his native Barbados, where he met with Prime Minister Mia Mottley. The two, along with the Attorney General Dale Marshall, toured the Eric Holder Jr. Municipal Complex in St. Joseph. The complex, which is named after him, houses the Tamarind Hall Branch Library, a post office, and the District F Magistrates Court and Police Station. Holder is vacationing in Barbados and leaves the island later this week.
As you know, this complex was named after him a few years ago, and he's on vacation and wanted to come and see the complex, and the Attorney General and myself came to accompany him. I want to first thank those who occupy these premises for the place is in wonderful shape, and in Barbados, where maintenance has been an issue for so many public buildings, it is refreshing to see that the approach that, Dale, I think you had towards the conceptualization of this project many years ago.
I think the Prime Minister, the Attorney General are engaged in a serious process that will help this nation deal with the problems that she has confronted coming into office. I have great confidence in her ability, and I think Barbados is indeed very lucky to have her leading this great nation.
We have more news after this video from our colleagues in multimedia. Stay with us. Welcome back. At least 73 people have been killed in torrential rains during the monsoon season in Kerala, India. The Cochin International Airport has been shut down due to a flooded runway, and more than 85,000 people have been displaced. According to the government sources, those that died were crushed under debris caused by landslides. A red alert has been issued in the state. Now let's take a look at some of the other stories that are making headlines around the world.
Should be regretting. Former Turkish Foreign Minister Yasir Yakis believes the escalating hostilities between Turkey and the United States could be solved with the release of Andrew Brunson, an evangelist pastor who is under house arrest and facing trial for terrorism charges in Turkey. The diplomatic fallout between the two countries is reported to have contributed to the near collapse of the lira, and Turkey is now under sanctions.
I think it's more political than economic, or economic measures are used in order to achieve a political goal, because Pastor Brunson is an evangelist Christian, and I understand that the people, the inner cabinet of President or close associates of President Trump are almost all of them are evangelists, and there is elections to be held in the United States on November the 4th, I think, and because of this, it has gained a domestic political dimension unnecessarily, and they cannot step back from this either.
Nigeria's president, Muhammadu Issoufou, has warned that if the Libyan crisis isn't solved, the Sahel, consisting of African countries, will be engulfed in terrorism, which will eventually make its way to Europe. In an interview with Reuters, the president said Niger is engaged in the fight against terrorism and requires the support of countries like Germany to ensure the Sahel is secure and stable to prevent a spillover. A jury is to decide the fate of Paul Manafort, former campaign chairman to Trump, after standing trial for bank and tax fraud charges. During the trial, the jury heard how Manafort hid his $16 million fortune in foreign bank accounts and used it to pay for luxury goods while failing to declare it in his tax returns.
And finally, we head to Mexico, where hundreds of people dressed as jaguars and ask the Virgin for a year of rain and good harvest. The festival takes place every August 15th in the state of Guerrero, where a mix of color, music, and religion is combined for this particular ritual. The roots of this tradition are linked to Mesoamerican mythology to invoke Mother Earth's powers to bring fertility and abundance. And we've come to the end of this news brief. For these and many other stories, you can find them on our website at talisiotv.net/English. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Talisio English, I'm Sony Gray. Thank you so much for watching.